This demo recording will show you how we can build a new automation from scratch and how we can work through the troubleshooting process should we make any mistakes during the automation build. So the first thing we're actually going to do is drag in a new task, and we're going to, instead of selecting from the vast library of tasks available within the platform, we're going to create a new one. And in this case, we're going to just create a simple ping action task. So this is going to execute a command locally, so from the Resolve server itself. And what we can then do is issue the command that we would want to execute. In this case, it's ping. And we're going to add a value for the parameter of IP address. So we have the parameter for IP address. So that, again, that's a variable we can pass in, and we're going to be able to pass it to the ping command. So now I have created this particular task, and we're going to ping that parameter. Now, in order to execute the automation, I need to add that parameter for the automation. So we're going to go over here to the parameters, and I'm going to add in a new parameter for IP address. So now I'm going to be able to save that parameter. Looking back at the automation model, I can now have that be able to be associated to the ping. So we've gotten the first building block. We're going to go ahead and test this. So by clicking the execute button in the upper right, I'm presented with the dialog box that's going to give me the parameters to put in. Plug in an IP address of a server that I know about. And the worksheet is where we're able to capture results from the execution. So this is my first step in the troubleshooting process, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. So now Resolve is going to execute the automation that I built. If I click on the upper right and double click on it, actually, I can be able to then be taken to the worksheet that's going to show me the results. Now, we've seen the start run, and we only see results for the tasks when they execute because it's being executed remotely, and we're not going to get the updates until it's complete. Now, there's going to be a big flaw in the automation already. I gave it ping, and when you run ping on a Linux host, it doesn't stop. So this is going to run, and how long is it going to run for? Well, if I look at the task itself that we had just created for the ping, I'm going to go ahead and edit this because we're going to make some changes to it. I can see that the default timeout of this command is 300 seconds or 5 minutes, a considerably long time. So we're going to go ahead and update that. And what that really means is that this worksheet is going to wait for 5 minutes for that execution to finish. There's no way to kill something mid-flight, however, so we're just going to wait for the timeout to happen. So by changing we're just going to change this to 5 actually. So by changing the timeout simply in the task itself, I can go back and be able to run this again. And I'm just going to pick on a different IP just for example. So the second one is the 130 address. And this time I selected current because I want it to go in the same worksheet that I already have open where I'm collecting results. So now I can be able to see the second iteration of this automation start, sorted by, actually sorted the opposite way. So the top one was the one I had just run. So again, it's going to run, but however, this time, because we have that 5-second timeout, I can see that the task has already completed with a bad result because it timed out. It's not because of the ping failed or anything. It's because the task itself did not complete, so we're missing the checkbox here, and it timed out. I'm actually going to go over to our model here and add another column that shows duration, so we can see that there was a duration of 5 seconds. And so now what I want to actually do is go back to the task itself, and we're going to modify the actual command, which is just this input parameter here. And instead of pinging the address, we're going to give it a -C5. So I'm going to limit the number of pings that we're going to send based on the command. So I've saved that task. Now I go back to my automation. If I click off of it and refresh, you can be able to see that the parameters have been updated. So now when I run the automation again for a third time, and check the worksheet, we'll be able to see that we've started it and that we have executed that 5 ping tests. And we can see this time it was good because we had a successful execution of the ping and then the process ended. So we have the start, the ping, and the end. So the 3 steps that are in the automation process itself. Now let's do something more with that ping result. Sorry for clicking around, but I'm actually going to take this output. Actually, we'll just drill into it so I can see it in more detail, and I'm going to copy it. And going back into the ping task, I want to make it smarter. I want to make it actually do something. So we have the ability to edit and modify what we call our parser. Paste the simple output. So there's my output that we had captured from executing the command. So now what I want to do is be able to mark this up so that I can capture the % packet loss. So up until this point, I don't really care. So I can mark this as any. And then I know that I'm always going to have received, comma, and a space. So that's going to be literal string. I need to basically start where I want to start parsing this from. And now for this number, I want to capture it. And when I capture it, it specifies it as what type of variable do I want. So we're going to say packet loss, and we're going to create that as an output. Now you can see it's identified it as a number based on what I highlighted. So we're going to capture it as a number, so a pattern match of a number. And then I can simply say I know I'm going to get % packet loss, so literal. And now I've basically kind of anchored where I want to be able to parse the packet loss from. So if I run a test, it's going to bring me to this screen with the output that I want to test it, and I can execute it. So now we've been able to execute, and the result here has my packet loss. So if I go in and modify the text of the sample, I can be able to then execute a test again and make sure that I'm getting the variables that I'm looking for. So now that I've captured packet loss, what I can do is be able to set a result for the execution that'll show up in the worksheet. So again, the worksheet results, I have a severity and a condition. We can see here it refreshed, and this was the 5-minute timeout from our initial execution against the 129. So now I want to define that the task presents a severity back. So I can go to severities and conditions, and it's critical when any of these, because you can select more than one, but I have an output of packet loss is going to be greater than a constant of 90. So now I've created a critical condition. Maybe I want to have a warning condition that says for a similar value that the output of the packet loss is greater than a constant of 10. So I can define different variables or different indicators back to the users based on the result of this happening. So we go ahead and save this. And now I can go back and continue to build my automation. So now the ping task has an output available of that packet loss. So if I want to be able to capture that as information and use it later on, I can be able to use it to set the flow. So what I can also do is use a condition within the automation that then takes that value, we'll say flows of packet loss, we'll say it's a numeric, and we're going to say it's equal to 0. So if I don't have any packet loss, so no packet loss, that's a good thing. And then we're going to go to another task where I'm going to then have this line, so this line is selected when it's good, so when there's no packet loss. We then want to do an SSH connection to the target node is that parameter of the IP address. And we're going to, for simplification's sake, we're going to just do, we'll say it's the LSB release. So I'm going to leverage this connection to be able to do the LSB command. And then we'll add in the step for it to be able to disconnect from that SSH session. And then we'll go to the end. Now, if there's a failure, for this example, we're just going to go straight to the end and not try to connect to it. So now I've connected the dots, and I can be able to execute this again as a more complete process. We're going to go back to that 129 address. And again, execute it in the current worksheet. So I use the current worksheet as kind of my test bed or my test results of doing these particular set of actions. And we can see that I have reached an abort. So something has gone wrong within this particular process. And what it actually is that when I capture the variable, I'm actually capturing it as a string. So because of this, we're going to, string equals 0. I was never actually converting it to a number. The number was within the task itself. So now by using the, string equals 0, yeah. I can then go through and 10 dot execute this. Again, go back to my current worksheet. Pings are good. Now I've gone to the connection and the connection failed. So again, here I see another error, and then obviously the subsequent LSB release is going to fail. I'm not going to be able to disconnect from it. I have a whole bunch of issues because I didn't properly plan out the path of the automation, but it all stemmed from not able to connect. So in this case, we are using, going back to the automation, a stored property for the SSH username and SSH password. So I have properties within the platform, all of these guys, for different connections to different systems. We're going to go in and modify that default SSH password to be the updated one that's going to be able to connect to this particular system. We're going to go back, save it again, and we're going to execute this particular automation again. Now, one thing that the platform is also doing is every time I'm modifying and editing this, we're creating a version list. So you can see all the different times that I saved this. I can see who saved it, the different versions, and be able to roll back as well. So, as you're going through the development process, rollbacks might be needed. You can be able to do so as well. I'm going to refresh this, and I'm going to be able to see that I have executed the start, successful ping. We have been able to do a successful SSH connection. I've gotten the release information. I've disconnected. Okay, now I'm expecting it to end, and I'm not seeing that end. So another capability within the automation is that this task can either wait for all the lines or branches to be able to go to it before it continues on, or in this case just ends, or I can say any. Well, because I'm doing a good, bad, kind of an if-else type of logic, I'm only going to ever have one of these paths go to the end. So I want to be able to update this to say any. So again, we'll go ahead and save this. And we're going to execute this time. We'll pick that other IP address, and now I can be able to, again, execute the automation, bring up my worksheet, be able to see the automation, so I can either keep clicking the refresh button, or you can actually tell it to do to auto refresh on a certain interval. For the demo here, I'm just going to click it. Now we can see that I've made the connection, I've gathered the server information, we can see it's a different OS, and now I'm having the end that I'm expecting. Now going back to the previous example where I did not have end happen, we saw early on with the ping, I had a 5-minute timeout, I had a 5-second timeout changing. The automation itself also has its own built-in timeout. So the process timeout here is in minutes. So the automation itself will time itself out after 10 minutes if it has not reached the final end of the automation. So if we waited another 10 minutes, you would see another abort similar to this, where the automation wasn't able to continue going on. Won't get into all the details of it, but if you happen to have noticed, we do have an abort model. So if one of those abort conditions gets met, you can actually execute a different automation that maybe sends an email, sends a message, creates an incident, whatever you would want it to be able to do that it's probably not going to be doing in the main. You can actually have that kind of secondary automation in reserve to be able to do something should you run into one of the abort conditions that we've run in today. Hopefully this was a detailed explanation of how we actually build a task from start, how we can be able to test the task, how we can build in parsing and logic to it, and then a couple examples of how we can test the logical flow of the automation, as well as testing our stored properties for the successful connectivity. Thanks again.